Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're venturing into the tumultuous world of the American Old West.
Right, looking at the story of the Dalton gang.
Exactly. We've got some excerpts here from, well, the Wikipedia page on them gives a pretty broad overview, origins, crimes, the end.
Mm-hmm. It's a good starting point.
So our mission for you listening is to really get past that sort of dime novel image.
Yeah, move beyond just the sensationalism.
We want to try and understand what drove them, the key moments, and maybe the context of their time.
Think of it as a shortcut, really.
Yeah.
Get the essentials without reading endless pages.
Your express route to understanding the Daltons. Okay, let's get into it.
So the story really starts with the family, right?
It does. When
Yeah.
you say Dalton gang, you usually think Bob, Grat, and Emmett first.
Those are the core guys, yeah.
Yeah.
But their older brother, Bill, he was in the mix too.
In a different way, though, the source calls him a spy, an informant,
Yeah.
sort of behind the scenes.
Which is interesting, but what's maybe even more surprising is where they started.
Yeah, not as outlaws. They were actually lawmen.
That's right. Before all the notoriety, Bob, Grat, Emmett, they all pinned on a badge at some point.
Working for the federal court in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and the Osage Nation, too.
It's quite a shift, isn't it? From lawman to, well, wanted outlaw.
And there are those family connections. Their mother, wasn't she related to the Youngers?
Yeah, half-sister to Cole and Jim Younger of the James Younger gang.
Makes you wonder, did that influence them, even though the Youngers were locked up when the Daltons were active?
Well, it definitely adds a layer. And you got to remember the family size. James and Adeline Dalton, they had 12 kids.
12. Ben, Cole, Lit, Frank, Grat, Bill, Eva, Bob, Emmett, Leona, Nancy, and Cy. That's a crowd.
Imagine managing that household back then.
And tragedy hit them early on. Their brother Frank, he was a deputy marshal.
Right, killed in the line of duty back in '87.
That seems like a key moment, because after Frank died, Grat stepped into his job, didn't he?
He did. Took over as deputy marshal in Fort Smith. And he brought Bob along to be in his posse.
So now they're officially enforcing the law.
Yep. And the source mentions an incident early on involving a guy named Charlie Montgomery.
Ah, the one impersonating a deputy.
That's him. Bob actually tracked him down while Grat was away and led the arrest. Montgomery ended up dead.
Shows Bob was active in the role, at least initially.
Then, January 1889, Grat and Bob both become deputies over in Wichita.
And Bob took another job too, right? For extra cash.
Yeah, with the Osage Nation Police, that came with a regular salary. And then he hires Emmett, his younger brother.
To guard prisoners. So, for a while there, the three main Dalton brothers are all technically on the side of the law.
Mm-hmm. And the Osage Nation had its own legal setup, due to treaties, so they were operating within that system too.
Which just makes the turn to outlawry even more.
Dark.
What pushed them over?
Well, the source points pretty clearly towards money. The desire for more of it faster.
Started with stealing horses, found that worked, and then bigger targets.
Exactly. Trains, banks. Maybe they felt underpaid as lawmen. Maybe just the lure of easy money. Tough times back then.
And one of their first big scores, or attempted scores, was the Alila train robbery. California, February 91.
Right, near present-day Earl Mart. Two masked men held up a Southern Pacific train.
Masks. So they were trying to hide their identities at first.
Seems like it. But interestingly, years later, their brother Lit apparently said Bob and Emmett confessed it was them.
A confession within the family. Interesting. Maybe bragging, maybe guilt.
Hard to say. But that robbery definitely kicked off a major pursuit. Sheriff Kay chasing them across the Southwest.
Sounds like classic Old West stuff. Bill Dalton even got arrested for a bit.
Yeah, but he got out on bond. But the chase really highlights the problems lawmen faced.
Like dealing with different jurisdictions, especially
Right.
tribal lands.
Exactly. The source mentions Sheriff Kay's time in Guthrie, Oklahoma. Sounds like a wild place.
Hangings at the town entrance, gambling on the sidewalks. Yeah, definitely the frontier.
But Kay eventually had to stop the chase. He had to go back to California.
For Grat's trial, right? For that Alila robbery.
Yep, and Grat's trial. Well, that's a whole other can of worms.
Seems like it was seriously flawed. Evidence maybe putting him elsewhere, but the railroad.
Southern Pacific Railroad.
Yeah.
A big player in California. They definitely wanted someone convicted.
And Grat's own lawyer also worked for the railroad. That's bad.
John Breckinridge. Yeah, a massive conflict of interest. The source says he showed up late, maybe drunk,
Oh, come on.
and apparently key facts weren't even brought up, like the train's firemen being accidentally killed by the expressmen, not the robbers.
Which the Daltons themselves didn't know. They thought Emmett did it.
That's what it sounds like. Plus, Breckenridge's witnesses were apparently pretty weak.
Even Sheriff Kay supposedly pointed out that the lawyer wasn't defending Grat properly.
And there was a railroad detective leaning on Grat, trying to get a confession. You can imagine how Grat felt.
Completely railroaded, pardon the pun.
Kay knew if Grat walked, the case against Bob and Emmett weakened. Kay and the DA even talked to Grat without his lawyer.
Trying to get the true story.
Yeah, suggesting maybe a deal, clarifying it wasn't first-degree murder. But it didn't really change Grat's situation.
So he's back in jail, waiting for sentencing, but then he doesn't wait, does he?
Nope, he escapes. September 27th, 1891.
Audacious is the word. From the Tulare County Jail in Visalia. How?
Not inside help, apparently. They used a file, a smuggled hacksaw blade.
Clever.
Yeah, hid the cutting by playing cards over a box, used blankets to muffle the sound. Pretty resourceful.
And that story about the deputy, Waggy, catching a cold watching the jail.
Huh, yeah. Grat asks him about his cold the next morning, knowing he'd been outside. Shows they were paying attention.
And Bill Dalton's reaction when he heard they escaped.
Classic. Tells Sheriff Kay, why'd they leave me behind? Then starts playing a song, You'll Never Miss My Brother Till He's Gone.
While trying to hide the cut bar. It's almost funny, in a dark way.
Definitely defiant. But Kay wasn't giving up. He found out how they escaped from the other guys who were recaptured.
And went after Grat again.
Relentlessly. Yeah. It led to a confrontation on Christmas Eve, 1891. Dalton Mountain.
Christmas Eve! Talk about dramatic.
Kay's posse ambushed Grat and another guy, Riley Dean. Dean was caught, but Grat,
You got away, kid.
yep, daring escape down the mountain, stole a horse. Even though he was wounded, guy was hard to keep down.
Wow. Even wounded, sick with pneumonia later, he still evaded them for weeks.
Finally made it back to Oklahoma, apparently with help from his brother, Cole. Survival instinct, I guess.
Meanwhile, back in Oklahoma, Bob and Emmett weren't waiting around.
No, they started putting together their own gang. They knew the territory.
Figured it was harder for lawmen to operate there. Less organized jurisdictional issues.
Probably. Easier to hide out, blend in maybe. They started recruiting guys they knew.
Like George Bitter Creek Newcomb and blackface Charlie Bryant.
Those were some of them.
Yeah.
And remember, there was still that $3,000 bounty on their heads from California.
So they were definitely targets. Deputy Marshal Heck Thomas was after them. Used to be Bob's friend.
Yeah, irony there. Thomas was known for being persistent.
And the reason they started robbing back in Oklahoma was it really to help Grat and Bill with legal fees.
That's what the source suggests for the first robbery, Wharton, May 91. Family loyalty maybe, or obligation.
The gang grew, though. Bill Doolin joined, Dick Broadwell, Bill Powers.
And don't forget Bob's informant, Eugenia Moore, alias Tom King, Miss Mondays. She was an outlaw herself.
Adds another layer, doesn't it? Their personal lives mixing with the crime.
And their hideout. Classic outlaw stuff. Cedar breaks along the Canadian River.
On Jim Riley's land. He was playing both sides.
Seems like it. Sheltering outlaws, but also cooperating a bit with the law. Keeping the peace for himself, probably.
Then Charlie Bryant. His end was pretty brutal.
Yeah, captured, but grabs a gun on the train, kills the deputy, then gets killed himself. Just constant violence.
They pulled off another train robbery. Lilietta got a decent amount of money.
They did, but it caused problems within the gang. Arguments over splitting the loot.
Ah, the old story. Trust breaking down.
Right. Doolin, Newcomb, and Pierce ended up leaving for a while because of it. Shows the instability.
But then Grat makes it back to Oklahoma after his escape.
And the gang sort of reforms. Some of those who left came back.
Bill Dalton, too, after he was acquitted back in California, but he wasn't riding with them.
More of an advisor, apparently. Not directly participating in the holdups.
So they try another train, Red Rock, but they suspected a trap.
Yeah, so they let the first train go and hit the next one instead. Pretty bold.
Got a lot in drafts and securities, but not much actual cash.
Still, it shows they were thinking, adapting.
And that story about Bill Dalton setting up an alibi the night before.
In the Kingfisher Hotel. Yeah, loudly telling a deputy marshal he was turning in early.
Then shows up for breakfast like nothing happened, just as the news breaks.
Very smooth. Or very suspicious. Makes you wonder.
Then came a dare. Another train robbery, but this one went wrong.
Tragically wrong. Civilians killed. They were just waiting on the platform, bold as brass.
Gunfight breaks out. 2 doctors caught in the crossfire and killed.
Just bystanders. That really upped the stakes, and the reward money went way up too.
Which leads us, I guess, inevitably to Coffeyville. October 5th, 1892.
The big one. Bob Dalton's grand plan. Robbed two banks at once.
Two banks, simultaneously, in broad daylight.
Yep. He wanted to outdo Jesse James, make a huge name for themselves.
But Emmett knew Coffeyville, didn't he? He wasn't keen on the idea.
Not at all. He argued against it, knew too many people there, sensed the danger.
His instincts were right. The plan started falling apart immediately.
The hitching post they needed behind one bank, gone. Street repairs.
So they had to tie the horses in an alley, more exposed.
Exactly. A small detail, but it mattered for their escape route.
And then they got spotted. Right away.
Pretty much as soon as they rode into the plaza, a storekeeper recognized them, even Grady with a fake mustache.
Word spread like wildfire.
And the townspeople armed themselves. Fast.
Inside the banks, things went wrong, too. Grat couldn't get into the vault at one bank because of a time lock.
Right. And Bob and Emmett had a violent exit from the First National.
By then, the citizens were outside, waiting.
And the gunfight erupted. Fierce, chaotic, bloody.
4 citizens killed, the town marshal. Just devastating for Coffeyville.
And for the gang.
Yeah.
Total disaster. Bob and Grad Dalton, killed. Dick Broadwell, Bill Powers, also killed.
4 outlaws down. What about Emmett?
Emmett. Incredibly, he survived. Shot multiple times, some say over 20 wounds, but he lived.
Amazing. And Bill Dalton and Bill Doolin, they weren't actually in the fight.
No, they were supposedly waiting nearby, maybe as lookouts, but they saw how things were going and bolted. Smart move for them.
So Emmett gets captured. What happened to him?
Sentenced to life, but he actually got paroled after 14 years.
Really? What did he do then?
Moved to Hollywood, surprisingly. Became a real estate agent, wrote books about the gang, even acted a bit.
Wow, quite the turnaround. The second act.
A very different one. But the outlaw story didn't completely end there.
Bill Doolin and Bill Dalton kept going.
Yeah, they formed the Doolin-Dalton gang, the Wild Bunch. Continued robbing banks and trains.
Until Bill Dalton met his end, too.
In a shootout, 1894. The violence just seemed to follow them.
And even within the family, there were disagreements about the story later on.
Oh yeah, Lit Dalton, another brother, apparently disputed Emmett's published account. Said it wasn't totally accurate.
Family feuds over the legacy. And other stories popped up too, fictional ones.
Like Eva Evans claiming her dad helped Grat escape. Blurs the line between fact and folklore.
And speaking of Evans, Chris Evans, was there a real connection there?
It's murky, rumors, some circumstantial stuff like rare $2 bills turning up.
Yeah.
Maybe he helped Grat, maybe not. It's debated.
And the whole mystery of the 6th man at Coffeyville.
Right. Conflicting accounts, confusion over names like Tom Evans or Bill Powers. Was there someone else who got away?
It just shows how chaotic that shootout must have been. Hard to get a clear picture even years later.
Definitely. But despite the brutal reality of it all, the Dalton gang legend took off.
Massively. Books, movies, comics. Even that Eagles song, Doolin Dalton.
They really captured the public imagination, didn't they? Became symbols of the Wild West.
So wrapping this up, the Dalton gang story, it's not simple, is it?
Not at all. You've got lawmen turning bad, family ties, ambition, desperation.
Daring robberies, some smart, some really badly planned.
Dramatic escapes, and then that incredibly violent end for most of them in Coffeyville. It's a potent mix.
And it leaves you thinking, why do these stories, the sensationalized ones, stick around?
What is it about outlaws like the Daltons that fascinates us? Is it something about law and order, rebellion?
Yeah, what does their enduring fame in pop culture say about how we remember, or maybe want to remember, the Old West?
It's definitely something to chew on. Worth looking beyond the myths, maybe digging into some other accounts if you're interested.
Absolutely. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring those layers.